It is Saturday night, which means it's power rankings time. I've got all of these all set up, so again, the divisions are clear, and I'm really glad that I'm doing 1 through 31, to be honest, because there's a lot more to talk about. This week I was updating the power rankings during the week, so there was no Saturday night meltdown like last week where I'm like, who do I move where? I was updating it during the week, so we're back to doing it the way that I always did it, and hopefully I've still got the divisions in the right order. We'll see pretty early here. So we're going to start at the fact that at 32 we've got Seattle. Now, I did have this. I have multiple magnets made of this face because I know during a season we'll need it. And I actually had Ottawa at one point this week at 32, and I had Seattle at 31. And then they played Montreal, and that changed. So just full disclosure. All right, number 31 out of the Central Division. So they're 8th in the Central right now, and that's Detroit. And, you know, I feel bad for Detroit fans because, you know, it started out with more promise, more potential, and it's gone to where it is, where I now have Detroit in 31st overall. And so they dropped one spot from last week, and they were 0-3 this week. Number 30, dropping 12 spots from last week, and they were 0-4 this week. And I think legit, right now, playing the worst hockey in their division. And that's the Vancouver Canucks. So I have the Vancouver Canucks in 30th. I know there may be those who say that's too harsh, but there isn't really a part of the Canucks game that's going well right now. And I can't justify them having them any higher than that because of who's ahead of them. So in 29th, it's important for me to put up 29th as soon as possible because I have Ottawa in 29th. So let's go ahead and explain what happened this week. Vancouver gets annihilated by Montreal and then annihilated by Toronto. And I know there's a loss in there that people are like, well, that loss wasn't that bad. Okay. Vancouver was 0-4 this week. Ottawa was 1-3. Ottawa beat Montreal, and then when they lost to Montreal today, they played them very well, and it was a very close game. So to me, right now, the Ottawa Senators are playing better hockey, even though record-wise, Ottawa sits at 2-9-1 and Vancouver's 6-9. But honestly, if you put these two teams on the ice right now and had them play the way they did today, Ottawa wins. Matt Murray's getting it together. So yeah, at least over his last two games, it's too early to say it's a trend, but it's at least fixed some of their statistical problems, while Vancouver continues to have major problems. Number 28, staying steady, same place they were last week, and that is out west, the Anaheim Ducks. So Anaheim this week. And Anaheim had a good week. They did. They went 2-1-1. So they're 5-5-3 now. They went 2-1-1. So they won 2 out of 4 games. And we'll see going forward whether or not they can maybe play spoiler. But for me, I still see them at 28. They're still having too many problems with their scoring overall. That being said, in 27th is a team that's also in their division, dropping one spot from where they were last week, and that's San Jose. San Jose this week went 1-0-1. Of course, they had some games delayed and moved around, and there are some teams that had games delayed and moved around this week. So you're going to notice some teams played 4 games and some played 1. There wasn't any team that didn't play a game this week, and I was thinking about that too. I was thinking, didn't Buffalo and New Jersey not play at all in the last 7 days? But they have. So, yeah, I have San Jose dropping the one spot. They went 1-0-1 this week. They're now 4-5-1, but I had a team pass them. I had a team that was in 27th last week, pass them. It's not that they played worse, just that team in 27th had a pretty good week. Number 26, also passing them, a Central Division team, which sits 7th in the Central. So this is where it gets interesting. So for Chicago, they've moved up 3 spots from where they were last week. And last week in 29th was higher than they were the first week, where I think they were 31st overall, right? So Chicago is gradually moving up. But if I was just ranking this by division, they only moved up 1 spot. People are like, yeah, so they're still 6th. Whatever. So I do like having the 1 through 31 because it causes more discussion of, but are they really better than Anaheim and San Jose? We'll never know. Unless they meet in the playoffs, we won't know. But I think Chicago had a pretty good week. They went 2-0-1. They're now 4-4-4 on the season. And Lankinen's giving them the kind of goaltending that is allowing them to slowly creep their way up this board. And if they start defeating teams that are up at the top, if they start defeating teams like Tampa, if they knock off Dallas tomorrow, their gains will become a little more dramatic. Again, I adjust this every day, so I have a whole lot more confidence in it. I didn't have to pour over it. Number 24. And this is a suffrage of not playing enough this week. So 8th in their division now is Buffalo. They dropped 2 spots from where they were last week. The only game they played this week, they lost. They're 4-4-2. And so again, they get passed by 2 teams that had decent weeks, and Buffalo, they can get it back together. They're back on the ice pretty quick here anyways. So I know Buffalo fans are still mad about the New Jersey thing, and rightfully so. And the NHL clearly sees there's a problem, because then the Minnesota-Colorado series went the same way. So thus all the changes they've been making to how the protocols are done. Number 24. And these guys had a drop this week. They only played 2 games. Again, this is the whole schedule moving around, right? And that's the LA Kings. So we're back to the West. They're 6th in the West. They dropped 4 spots from where they were last week. And yeah, it was a rough week for them. 0-2. And now they're against Vegas again tomorrow. So it's possible that by the end of tomorrow, I have flipped LA and Buffalo in spots. It's possible. Number 23. These guys move up 2 spots from where they were last week. They had a 2-1 week. We're in the West, though, and that's Arizona. So Arizona, their record now is 5-5-1. So again, we're at that 500 mark, but I want to see it over a more prolonged time. And hey, they've got their next 3 games against St. Louis. They win 2 out of 3 against St. Louis so far. It moves them up a little bit. If they win the next 2 out of 3 against St. Louis as well, they'll move up a lot. There'll be some dramatic movement for Arizona, and for St. Louis, it would likely be the opposite. So today I did move them up, because yeah, they had a pretty good day today, even though it was overshadowed a little bit by the officiating, right? Number 22. These guys move up 5 spots. They only played 2 games, but the difference in the Rangers is substantial. So the Rangers move out of last place in their division. So again, if I was just doing divisional ones and not measuring in the entire National Hockey League, they only would have flipped 1 spot. But right now, the Rangers at 4-4-2 and having won both of their games this week, I think they're on their way up. It feels like something's changed now that the D'Angelo situation has finally come to a head, and this is a team that is bound and determined to prove, hey, we're better than what our record might have stated. So important week upcoming to build on that. We'll see whether or not they can, whether or not they do. And yeah, it's entertaining to me if this team's able to keep that run going and get back into the hunt. Because then we still have that debate, right? Like, was it Tony or was it not? Or was this just a team that was underachieving finally coming around? Number 21. These guys played 1 game. They won that game. Then the outbreak happened. So I have New Jersey at 21. And so we'll see in the upcoming week whether or not New Jersey ends up dropping back. But for New Jersey right now, they're 4-3-2. And again, they won the 1 game they played this week. And it was just one of those. They ended up passing LA. They end up ahead of Buffalo. So I had Buffalo and New Jersey right next to each other last week, right? Where I had Buffalo at 23rd and I had New Jersey at 24th. So when New Jersey beat Buffalo, I swapped them. Because it's all right. So New Jersey's ahead of Buffalo, and then they passed LA. So that's part of how you end up being up to this point. And of course, Vancouver's massive drop allowed other teams to move up who may not have had great weeks. So that's how New Jersey moves up 3 spots. Number 20, moving up 1 spot from last week. They were 2-1 this week. We're going back to Canada, and that's the Oilers. You know, the Oilers, I think they're close. And then tonight against Calgary, a lot of the concerns I've had with the Oilers kind of came back in that game. The goaltending numbers, the defense, the intensity from one period to the next, a lot of those problems come back again. And they have 9 more games against Calgary. So, again, they fall to 6-7. They were 2-1 this week. We'll see how they do in the upcoming week. But, man, Battle of Alberta looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And as you see, I have the Oilers still 5th in the division. They're still close because Calgary's not that far ahead of them. All right, number 19, staying the same spot they were last week, and that is Nashville. So we're back in the Central, Nashville 6th in the Central, and they're 19th overall. Nashville this week went 1-2. They're now 5-6. And I debated about whether or not to have Nashville ahead of Edmonton or not. So if you want Edmonton ahead of Nashville, okay. They're not going to play each other this year, so there's obviously speculation involved. But I do think Nashville had a decent week. I think that their little mini series against Florida, I think they played well enough for the split in that series, and the comeback against Florida was kind of nice and kind of fun. Not so much if you're a Florida fan, but hey. So yeah, I leave them in the same spot they were last week at the end of it. Number 18. This week they went 2-2. They move up 4 spots from last week, and it's Calgary. Now I know for Flames fans, they may be frustrated by what they're seeing as inconsistency. I will say this. If the Flames played in the first period, they would be maybe even top 10. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic. This is a team that absolutely stumbles out of the gate and then kind of relies on the comeback. Now tonight, they were good in that they scored the first goal against Edmonton. But there are still some concerns I have with Calgary, but you'll see they're 4th in their division. So the Canadian division, I feel there's 3 teams that are playing really well. There are 2 teams that are not. One that's been abysmal, and 2 that are kind of in the middle and ready to play spoiler as soon as possible. And I think both the Flames and the Oilers, whoever wins the Battle of Alberta, wins the most of those 10 games, has a really good chance of being, I will say, 3rd or 4th in the division. I don't think Montreal or Toronto get caught right now. Number 17, dropping 4 spots from where they were last week. They went 0-2 this week, and that's Pittsburgh. So we're back into the East. I have Pittsburgh at 5th in the East, and I have them at 17th overall. So, not a fantastic week for them. There's still some question mark there with Tristan Jarry and what exactly you're getting if you're Pittsburgh, and whether or not he's going to be good enough to get them into a playoff spot. So there are a lot of question marks with Pittsburgh right now. I still think they find a way to do it because they're Pittsburgh, but we'll see. So now we move up into the top row. At number 16, dropping 1 spot from where they were last week. Still in the East, and it's the Islanders. The Islanders have had trouble scoring. They did beat Pittsburgh, so after they beat Pittsburgh, I said, all right, we will do the swap. Simple as that. Number 16, the Islanders, they went 1-0-1 this week. Keep in mind I'm recording this Saturday night. Somebody tried to correct me last week on the power rankings and saying that I was wrong, and they were including a game that happened the day after I recorded this, which is that I do not have psychic powers. I've said this in news videos. I'm going to say it in the power rankings. I do not have psychic powers. I don't know what's going to happen. Vancouver will not make the playoffs. But I do not know what's going to happen. So the Islanders, I have them. They're 1-0-1, and they're 4-4-2 overall. They're equivalent to the Rangers. I have them ahead of the Rangers. They started out ahead of the Rangers. I still think overall they have a better chance. But again, it's close. A lot of these divisions are close. Number 15, moving up 1 spot from last week, even though Columbus had a sub-500 week. They were 1-2. But with Laine added to this team and Roslovic scoring, I've been impressed with Columbus's game overall. Now, it's going to be tough without Werenski for a couple of weeks. It is quite possible that they find themselves down in this region next week. But that would mean falling behind Nashville. That would mean that Chicago, and again, it's possible, Chicago here at 26 and Columbus at 15. There's not a lot between them when they play against each other. Just over the entire league, I have Chicago where I do as opposed to Columbus. But I could see Chicago going on a bit of a run here and being a huge surprise without Taves and Doc. I don't know how this is working. Wonder if Taves will come back sooner from his whatever is bothering him if he sees the team's near a playoff spot. Number 14, they only played 2 games this week. They were supposed to play more. They were 1-1. They don't move up, they don't move down, and that's Minnesota. So we're back to the West. I keep wanting to put Minnesota in the Central, so I have to say that out loud, like they're in the West. They're in the West. Minnesota's not in the Central, even though it looks like these teams should be in the same division as Minnesota, they're not. So I need to remind myself. Minnesota, obviously, currently at 6-5, 1-1 this week, and once they come out of this time off, this unplanned time off, we'll see how sharp they are. Not every player who comes out of this illness ends up being as sharp as they were beforehand, and for some it takes them a while to get back up to speed. So we'll see. We'll see how many players are affected from Minnesota and how this affects their fortunes going forward. But for now, I still have them fourth in the division. Number 13. They had a pretty good week, minus the meltdown, and that's Florida. So Florida is moving up the board. They move up 4 spots from last week. They went 2-0-1, so they're still undefeated in regulation. And yeah, so they did move up. They stayed 17th 2 weeks in a row. Now they're up to 13th, and we will see how good they can be. They're at home against Detroit again tomorrow. It's the one problem I have with Florida so far. Their schedule hasn't really been difficult. And so they had the matchups against Nashville. They looked okay. That meltdown against Nashville was concerning, and now they've got Detroit again. So they could easily have more victories, and we still may not know exactly what we have with Florida, but I have them at 13th. Number 12, dropping 2 spots from last week. They went 1-1-1, and we're in the Central Division for this as well, and that's Dallas. Dallas has dropped. If they don't have Hudobin, and of course they're not going to tomorrow because something happened between Rick Bowness and Anton Hudobin. I still haven't seen what it is. We'll find out over the next couple of days, I would think, if we don't find out tomorrow or even tonight. It's possible it's come out tonight and I haven't seen it yet. But for Dallas, there are concerns there. So while Dallas's overall record is 5-2-1, the fact they only won 1 out of 3 games this week, yeah, there's a little bit of concern to that. And we'll see whether or not they can get this back. Remember, they're still about a month out from getting Bishop back, and from Sagan, I think, is farther out than that. So they're still going to be going without 2 major pieces of that roster for a while. Number 11, moving up 1 spot from last week. They went 2-0-1, and we're back into Canada, and it's Winnipeg. So the Jets move up to 11th. The Jets' overall record is 7-3-1. And yeah, they looked good against Calgary. They held off the Flames in back-to-back games. And so I have them just outside the top 10. It's possible they get there next week. We'll just have to wait and see, won't we? But I've been impressed with Winnipeg. I've let my wife know that it's possible. I find myself rooting for Winnipeg a little more than I normally would because it'd be nice to see the team she cheers for in there since Canucks, whatever. So it'd be nice to see the Jets get in there and maybe win a round or 2, that kind of thing this year, because somebody in my house should be enjoying the playoffs. And so yeah, if Winnipeg's the team in the North that ends up being the team to beat, and it'll be interesting to see against Montreal and Toronto just where they're at, because it feels like that's the 3 teams who are most likely to take this division. Number 10, and a drop this week. St. Louis went 2-2 this week. They dropped 3 spots from where they were last week. The interesting thing is they still stay the same spot in the Western Division. So while I have St. Louis drop 3 spots after the back-to-back losses against Arizona, they stay in the same spot in their division. So this is where I like having both, where I can say, hey, look, they're still 3rd in their division. I'm not saying there's anything to panic about, but in the entire National Hockey League, I now have them at 10th instead of at 7th. Their overall record now is 7-4-1. And again, there are probably a couple of concerns here if you're St. Louis. Nothing to get too worked up about, though. Number 9, moving up from last week, is Philly. They move up 2 spots from last week. And I'm going to go ahead and say that for me with Philadelphia, I was impressed with how they played against Boston. No, they weren't able to finish against Boston very well, but Boston is ahead of them on the power rankings. So this is one of those things where I don't penalize a team too badly when they lose against a team that's ahead of them, especially in that last game between Philly and Boston. Philly played so well, and they just couldn't quite get it over the finish line. So they end up winning 1 out of 3 on the week, but they only lost 1 in regulation, the other one in extra time. So they get moved up because I thought they had a better week than St. Louis did. And of course, Dallas took a little bit of a drop as well. So those are the teams they pass. Number 8, moving up 1 spot from where they were last week, is Carolina. So in the Central, Carolina, I still have them 2nd. That has not changed. Carolina, they went 2-1 this week. Like I said, they move up 1 spot. They're 6-2 overall. And there's only 1 team in the division that can beat them. And you guys know which team that is. That's the only team that I think can legit beat them. Dallas is not, at this stage, is not in the same category as Carolina to me. It's just not. So we'll see with Carolina whether or not they can maintain that spot. But notice that Dallas, Florida, Columbus, I have the other teams pretty far back of them in the overall picture of things. So that's why I like the 1 through 31. Number 7, dropping one spot from last week. They went 3-1. They're now 8-2-2, and that's Montreal. So Montreal drops one spot only because I felt there was a team that had a really good week and dropped them down. And Montreal losing to Ottawa, a bit concerning. They beat Ottawa today, oddly enough. So the game where they lost to Ottawa, I actually thought Montreal was the better team. They just were out goaltended. And in the one today, I thought Ottawa was the better team, but the goaltending of Jake Allen bailed out Montreal. So that I find mildly concerning. Not a huge amount, though. I mean, Montreal's still 8-2-2. They were 3-1 on the week. Those 2 wins over Vancouver, though, I just don't see any pushback from Vancouver. And when a team gets this far down in the power rankings, there's less credit given to the teams that beat them than there is if, say, Montreal beats Toronto 7-3. Then, yeah, Montreal goes just steaming up the charts. But, the last, 5 games, Vancouver's lost 23-9. So, for Montreal, they're still in the top 7. We'll see this coming week where they're going to be at. Number 6, moving up 2 spots from last week. They won all 3 games they played. They're now 8-1-2, and that's Boston. So I still have them second in their division. I thought they had a good week. They had to rely on comebacks. They've had 4 comeback victories. Makes me mildly nervous because you can't rely on that for long. That can be something that's it's hard to replicate night in and night out. It's hard to rely on that. It's not really a strategy. Okay, we're behind. Now we get to play. Like Calgary, like these guys, for instance. Whereas, all right, we took the first period off. Now we get to play. It's bad strategy. So we'll see how Boston does this coming week. But again, I do have them at number 6. And it was tough for me between Boston and Montreal. And since they don't play each other this year, Montreal can't whoop them. So I currently have Boston at 6 because they're unwhoopable by Montreal. Otherwise, yeah, Montreal would have that spot. I'm not lying that I know Boston would lose because it's a bad matchup for Boston. Number 5, losing both games this week hurt Washington, dropped them down 1 spot. But I didn't feel like Washington necessarily played badly. They just got beat. And again, that's something with power rankings where the win-loss records are important. But when I'm doing this, especially daily, that's when I'm looking, okay, so they lost that game today, but they played well. Or they lost that game today, but the other team, just gutted in and found it, like the New York Rangers. So, you'll reward the Rangers, and it depends on how that game goes as to whether or not I would drop the Caps down. So I dropped the 1 spot. They're 6-2-3. Both regulation losses are this week, but not to me something to be overly concerned about yet. Although they have won 6 out of 11, which means they've lost 5 out of 11, 3 of them in extra time. Number 4, and dropping 3 spots from where they were last week. They went 1-0-1, but Colorado, there's some concern. There's some concern for Colorado in the West because now you're without McKinnon. You've got a bunch of guys out week to week. And against Minnesota, and again, that series ends up being wiped out, and then games after are wiped out. So Colorado didn't play nearly as many games as they were supposed to. And basically, Colorado gets passed. So we'll see when they start playing again. Colorado now 7-3-1. We'll see where Colorado's at. But we'll see when they get playing again. Next Saturday, there's supposed to be 13 games on. So while this is relatively early for power rankings, next Saturday, if we get all those 13 games, and that's an if, not so much. Number 3, moving up 2 spots from last week. They won both games this week, and that's Toronto. So number 1 team I have in the Canadian division. The one bragging rate that Montreal had over Toronto was, hey, we haven't lost to Ottawa. Well, now you have. So both of these teams have lost to Ottawa. It's one of those weird oddities in the Canadian division. But for Toronto, that was at the start of the year. And Toronto just looks fantastic. They're firing on all cylinders. I know people are going to say, well, wait till the playoffs. But we're not in the playoffs, are we? We are now looking at a team that is sitting at 9-2-1. and they're currently first overall in the NHL record-wise, at least points-wise, right? So yeah, they've been fantastic in the North, and when we get to the playoffs, this can be really interesting to see if whoever comes out of the North, if they can play defense well enough against whoever comes out of those American divisions. Because I feel like the American divisions are playing better defense. I'm going to do the numbers on that at some point, because it feels like defensively the other divisions have it more together than the North does. North is just crazy. It should be called the Wild West up north. Number 2, moving up one spot from last week. They won the only game they played this week, and that's the Vegas Golden Knights. So I have them number 1 in the West. I swapped them with Colorado. Vegas against LA looked fantastic, and it really shouldn't be a surprise. But Vegas right now, again, they're going to have that great record. Playing against California teams, they should anyways. And so while they lost some games this week due to outbreak and everything, they looked sharp when they came back, and they look like a contender. So I have them at number 2. And number 1, moving up one spot from last week and back where they started at 7-1-1. They went 3-0 this week, and it's Tampa. I think the most impressive thing with Tampa is just how complete their game looks, and the depth up front, the depth on the blue line. Vasilevsky's been fantastic for the most part, and Tampa just looks like the best team right now. I don't know who stops the Tampa Bay Lightning, and in that division, I don't see Dallas. Florida, we'll see, right? Florida and Tampa, that should honestly be a pretty good rivalry this year. And of course, Carolina, it should be really fast matchups between those teams. But I don't legit know who can stop Tampa in a playoff series in that division. The playoff matchups currently, and keep in mind teams haven't played the same number of games. Tampa at number 1 would play Carolina in the Central. Florida would play Columbus. In the West, Colorado would play Anaheim. So because they've played more games, Anaheim is in 4th place. St. Louis would play Vegas. Out East, you've got Boston and Pittsburgh as the 1-4 matchup, and Philadelphia and the Capitals, 2-3. And in the North, Toronto would face the Oilers. That salivating you heard is Rogers' management, the idea of McDavid against Matthews in a playoff series. And then Montreal against the Jets would be 2-3. So that'd be Hellebuck against Price. Yeah, you don't have to worry about marketing these series a whole lot. And this is why the NHL, honestly, while there's been all these roadblocks and COVID shutdowns, I think the NHL has to be really happy with the way things are going. And if these were all the playoff matchups, like, I mean, Anaheim's not going to get in there. Columbus would need to pick up their record because there's other teams that just haven't played as many games. But these playoff matchups would be fantastic, and they'd sell themselves. Boston, Pittsburgh in the first round? Yes. Washington, Pittsburgh in the first round? Sure. Boston, Philly? Yep. So there's got to be some very happy studio executives right now with the idea of what they may get in the playoffs. And we're not that far away because this season is short. So thank you guys so much for tuning in for another week. For people who skip to the end, you're going to ask questions about things I've already explained about why teams are where they are on the board. And so there you go. I am deciding to stay completely out of the comment section on this video for a minimum of 24 hours after it posts. Because again, I explain why teams move up. I explain why they move down. I put it all on paper. I figure that's the explanation. So there you go. Thank you guys again for all your support. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And hey, I'll talk to you again soon.